Jewel, you're joining us from the United States. What's the feeling there at the moment? Is it a united country?
I think we're struggling right now as a country. What I do hope continues to happen is that people realize we're more than our haircuts, we're more than whether we're red or blue. We're all people that are worrying about our families and to find those unifying factors. Because I think what makes America great when we're great is diversity and not a monoculture. Right now, not having a monoculture is a little painful because we have these two sides that really seem to be struggling, but hopefully we'll get there.
2020 has not been an easy year. You're living in the Rockies in Colorado. Is that a nice place to get away from it all?
Yeah, as somebody who grew up in Alaska with a lot of open space around me, I really love to be in nature. And so the Rockies is a very beautiful place to be in general, and especially during COVID, because my son and I still get outside and nature is very resilient.
This year marks 25 years since the release of your debut album, Pieces of You. When you listen back to it now, what do you hear?
I hear earnestness. Uh, I hear a lot of authenticity. I really fought to have that record be very simple and to not be any fancier than I was. And when I made that record, it wasn't popular to be a folkie. It was obviously the height of grunge. And so I fought really hard to stay true to who I was. And it didn't look like it was going to work out, but ultimately ended up becoming quite a Cinderella story.
It certainly did. Do you have a favourite track on the album?
You know, I've been learning the record because I'm going to be doing a live show online where I sing the entire album top to bottom. I've never sung all these songs at one time. And so learning them has been really wild. And I think my favorite is called Amen. I wrote it after Kurt Cobain's death. And I think in about the zeitgeist of we're in pain. Now what? What do we do when our heroes are gone? How do we pick ourselves up? How do we process pain? Why aren't we taught what to do with pain? Those are questions I've always been really interested in, and I think are even more relevant now than ever.
When you wrote You Were Meant for Me, you went on a songwriting trip to Mexico and ended up accompanying the Mexican police on a drug bust. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I'll try and do a short version. I'm friends with a songwriter named Steve Poltz, and we went down to write songs together. We each got signed separately, but at the same time. And we went down there to write, and we got lost and ended up in this abandoned town. And we were sitting on the beach wondering what to do, and we saw these four figures walking toward us, and we realized they each had guns and that they were federales. And we asked them the obvious and pertinent question, do you know where we could get a boat to go whale watching? And so they said we could go with them. So we get in this boat because we're clearly geniuses. And they hand me binoculars and I'm looking for whales. And I asked them, what brings you guys here? And they said, we're here looking for drug smugglers. And I was like, right now? And they're like, see. I'm like, is it dangerous? And they're like, see, this is why we evacuated the village. So while I was looking for whales, they were looking for drug smugglers. And we actually found one. A boat sped up and our boat sped up. And we ended up on this high speed chase. And they overtook the guys and one guy narked, and we went on this traipsing journey through the desert and found a lot of drugs and ended up helping load them all up onto the boats. And there's pictures, if you Google Jewel drug bust photo, you'll see me as a like 18-year-old holding an AR-15, and my friend Steve has a kilo of weed. It's pretty silly, but we ended up staying and writing songs, and we hung out with the federales, and we wrote You're Meant for Me on that trip.
The rich tapestry of life.
It is.
You were, of course, famously living in your car, homeless, living on the streets of San Diego, basically, before the album took off. What do you remember about those days?
You know, I moved out when I was 15. I knew that statistically, kids like me that were raised in an abusive household, we become a statistic. You know, you end up repeating the cycle. And I didn't want to be a statistic. And I remember thinking about nature versus nurture. And if I received bad nurture, could I ever get to know my real nature? You know, if happiness wasn't taught in my household, could it be taught? Or was I just screwed? I didn't want to believe that. You know, I wanted to believe I could change and relearn an emotional language, I called it. So I set off on this very ambitious mission. And fast forward 3 years, I'm homeless. You know, I ended up homeless because I wouldn't have sex with a boss. He wouldn't give me my paycheck. I couldn't pay my rent that month. Started living in my car. Didn't think it'd last long, but my car ended up getting stolen. I was having panic attacks. I was agoraphobic. I almost died in the emergency room parking lot because they wouldn't see me because I didn't have insurance. I almost died of blood poisoning. So it was a really difficult time, and I was shoplifting a lot. And I went into this dressing room to steal a dress, and I looked in the mirror and I realized I was a statistic. I didn't beat the odds. That I would end up in jail or dead if I didn't turn my life around. And I remember this quote by Buddha that said, happiness doesn't depend on who you are or what you have, it depends on what you think. And I wanted to see if I could turn my life around one thought at a time and go back to thinking about this nature versus nurture. And I ended up learning so much that year. It's why on the cover of my album, I say what we call human nature in actuality is human habit. And a lot of those songs like Daddy and I'm Sensitive are all about how do we become who we are? And if we don't like it, how do we become something else? So all of that really comes up as I think about that record. And I remember I almost didn't sign my record deal, which sounds really odd for a homeless person, but I was kind of terrified because I knew I had a lot of emotional baggage as a person. God forbid I get famous. It's, you've seen that movie. And so I made myself a promise, on the beach. I remember I was in San Diego on the beach and I made myself two promises. One, that my number one job would be to figure out how to be a happy person. And my number two job would be to be a musician and to never swap those orders. And then also to always choose art over fame. And I feel the most proud as I look back in 25 years of my career that I've never sold those two things out. It's been a messy ride. It hasn't been perfect, but I always chose my humanity over my fame and my career. And I always chose art over fame. And that's why I made decisions like switching genres a lot. It's why I took years between records, which is terrible for fame, but I needed it psychologically. So it's interesting and really rewarding, I think, to look back on these 25 years and feel that way.
You were discovered in a coffee house. What happened next?
Yeah, there was a big bidding war over me as a homeless kid. They didn't know I was homeless. I remember limousines pulling up. Every record executive, the biggest record executives that there were, every label was offered $1 million signing bonus. But I read a book about how the industry worked and I turned down the $1 million because I realized it was a loan and I had to sell records to pay that back or else I'd get dropped. And I knew I was going to make a folk record and the odds of that working were so slim. But I wanted to have a long career and maybe have an ardent following, I hoped, as a singer songwriter. The record failed for over a year and I was starting to lose, hope, like maybe I made the wrong decision. Maybe I should have taken the money. And that's when Bob Dylan took me on the road and he just really believed in me and he mentored me and he went over my lyrics with me and he really encouraged me. And then Neil Young took me out next. And it was that same thing where he's like, you're a singer songwriter. So F radio, F everything. You're a singer songwriter. It's different. You have to keep doing what you're doing. And they just gave me that courage to, against all the odds, keep going. And then things slowly started turning around after that, maybe a year after the record was out. I think I was discovered in 93 and the record started taking off in 96. So my label stuck with me that whole time because I think a big part of it was because I cost nothing and they could afford to keep me. And slowly I started, all of a sudden it took off and I was selling 1 million albums every month for over a year. It was crazy.
To that point, you were obviously showing wisdom well beyond your years and well beyond your experience, but fame is a really strange beast. How did you adapt to becoming famous?
Fame was hard for me. It wasn't something I lusted after a ton, although I was very ambitious. The more people told me I'd never make it, the more I was like, I'll make it, I'm kind of stubborn, but that promise I made to myself to choose my humanity over my career meant making some tough decisions that seemed really clear. Like after my second record, I needed a break. I quit for 2 years at the height of my fame, which nobody does. But I needed that time to psychologically adjust. And once I realized I could make my career what I wanted, I didn't have to stay on the merry-go-round. I won the lotto. My record did so good. I could either feel pressure, like, how do I top it the rest of my life? Or I could go, I just won the lotto and I never have to top it again. I'm going to do what makes me happy. And so that's what I did. I switched genres. I took years off between records. I just got to do anything I wanted. It gave me this real pass, if you will, to take the pressure off.
What's it like as a successful single woman dating? Do you look suspiciously at people that come into your life?
Gosh, I live in the middle of nowhere. I don't pick real popular places to live. And you're a single mom, so that's your priority. So yeah, I don't meet a lot of people, but I think that the people you meet are it's pretty clear. But, as you get to be my age and a mom especially, you get really picky because I'm happy on my own. Love to be with somebody. But definitely not something I'd be willing to settle for because what I have going is pretty good. You know anyone? Why? What do you got?
Lots of good Aussie blokes, and we don't have a lot of COVID out here, so you're welcome down here anytime, Jill. A,
Sounds good.
a lot of people have got very interested in the fact that you mentioned you dated Sean Penn. You wrote about it in your autobiography, which came out in 2015, but you dated him in the mid 90s. So everybody was very surprised that it had taken so long and had been such a secret. Was there a reason why you kept it secret at the time?
Yeah, when I wrote my biography, Sean was such an important part at that time in my life that I wanted to talk about what he was for me. And so I sent it to him first and wanted to make sure that, I had his permission. Um, we dated before I was successful, and he really believed in me. And Sean was such a is, I think he's kind of misunderstood, but he's such a he's very intelligent, and he was just so supportive, and he believed in me in a way that nobody had, and it was just sort of this buoy. It was another time sort of when my career was just sort of really stalled out. And it was very special. I just have such sweet, tender memories of it. But I never wanted to be known for that. So uh, I remember going to the Venice Film Festival, and I never let myself have photographs with him. Like, I was not the kind of girl that was going to get known because I was dating somebody. It's not how I'm wired. I'd rather not be famous than be famous for that. And so I just really felt like it wasn't a relevant thing to talk about. I wasn't desperate to get in the media.
Was there a wise 50-year-old trapped in a 15-year-old's body all those years ago? Your wisdom through all of these incredible mazes that, it takes decades of working out who you are and being who you want to be. When you look back, are you proud of the way you've lived your life thus far?
Sweet of you to say. I wrote a song called Painters on my first album, and it says, I'm a painter and I'm painting myself a beautiful world. I I remember at a very young age, not too young, 18 or 19, feeling like if my artwork is my best art, I'm an a-hole. I want my whole life to be a beautiful work of art. I want how I'm mothering. I want to put a lot of thoughtfulness into it. And that means I have to give time and honor each of those things, which means I have to do more than my career. And I am proud of that. It's like I said, it's been messy. If you read my book, it's not been some perfect ride, but I never sold myself out. And I'm very proud of that. I didn't always make the best choices. I did as good as I could, but I never did sell that out. And I am very proud of that.
So much of what happened to you in your early life has obviously steered you in the direction that you've gone. As I said, you've done it with extraordinary wisdom well beyond your years. But your son Case is probably living a very different life to your young life. What do you teach him about how to navigate the world?
Yeah, it's so true. Being raised in Alaska, nature was such a parent to me. It taught me that the tide goes out. Sometimes you feel terrible, but it always comes back in. And when I would watch trees, I realized our thoughts are like the weather. Weather comes and goes. You don't hang on to them, it'll pull you over. If I thought every thought was a fact, I'd go crazy. And it taught me hard work and tenacity. And Alaskan women are very self sufficient, and there's not male female gender roles. It was a great way to be raised, even though it was a really hard childhood. It's a new era for every parent, though, not just me. We're parenting in a very unprecedented time.
After you released your autobiography, you started up a website and a blog called Jewel Never Broken. Can you tell me why you did that?
Yeah, the first promise I made myself before I signed my record contract was to figure out how to be a happy, whole human. I didn't want to be a human full of holes, and I was full of holes. I was addicted to shoplifting right when I was homeless. And I realized if we're addictive by nature, that can't be a total accident, right? There has to be some evolutionary reason. And can I get addicted to positive things? And that's when I started writing a lot to replace that habit of stealing and looking at this sort of behavioral triad of stimulation, response, reward. And when I realized I could start neurologically rewiring myself through a lot of willful practice and dedication. It was very empowering. And that's why I was really careful about that record contract, because I just started figuring out happiness and I didn't want to lose it. And so I made good on that promise. I kept developing exercises and looking at habits and what parts of my personality worked and didn't. And then I wanted to see if it could work for other people, that didn't have access to therapists or traditional support systems. Other kids like me that might just think, no, it's hopeless. I don't have the resources to learn how to be happy. Nobody should feel doomed their entire life that they just don't have the resources available. If you're willing to look in the mirror and say, I am accountable for my happiness, what am I going to do? That's very empowering. So I started putting these tools into a youth foundation about 18 years ago. These exercises got proven to rewire your brain by a neuroscientist, which was crazy. And now I'm creating like a curriculum for public schools here so that it's built into a language arts program, and developing a curriculum for companies to help companies invest in the mental health of their employees, because so many sick days are attributed to stress and anxiety, and we're all dealing with a lot of stress and anxiety.
I know you're squeezing about 5 lives into one this time round, but what are you working on at the moment?
Working on really, I feel like with the pandemic, it's threefold. It's the virus, it's the economic fallout here in the States, and it's this mental health fallout. So figuring out tools that anybody can practice, whether they have a therapist or not, for me is fun as songwriting. So that's what I've been doing. It's the Jewel Never Broken website if people want to go to a free website to learn. And then writing a record. I've been writing a record and a book. So those two things will be coming.
So when will we see those?
I have a song out now called Grateful, and another one called No More Tears, and you can get the flavor of the new album. I'm writing for my voice more. I've never written for my voice. I'm a much better singer than I've ever written for. So you'll hear kind of a soul, slightly 70s sound on those. And I don't know when the whole record will come out. I'll figure it out here soon.
Well, you've been busy, of course, homeschooling your son, Case. How are you going with that?
Man, shout out to all the parents who are doing this. I only have one child, so I really can't imagine having three kids, and especially like some of my friends have littles at the house and they can't do kindergarten Zoom. Like it's so hard. So everybody's doing the best they can. And I just tell everybody here, just turn the news off. Like, if you're going crazy, they're winning. So just turn the news off and take care of yourself.
So have you got a subject that you're good at teaching, Case, and one that you really would love to see the back of?
Luckily he's only in third grade. And so I can kind of handle the math. Past third grade, I'm not going to be able to help this kid with math. That's definitely my weakest subject. But we wrote a song together. That was a lot of fun. He's in a band. He's the drummer in a band. It's so cute. A bunch of 9-year-olds called Mask On, Rock On. It's very sweet.
Mask On, Rock On. That's fantastic. That's definitely a 2020 band.
It's so sweet seeing them rock out.
So it sounds like we've got a mini Jewel on the way.
Oh gosh, I don't know if he'll become a professional musician, but whenever you find anything your child applies themselves to and cares about, it makes you so happy.
If they're experiencing joy, that's all you can ask for.
Yes. Yeah, you hope your kid finds a passion. It's how many of us don't have that. So, yeah, I hope he finds it, whatever it is.
Now, I know that you and your dad had a few turbulent years, but you're now very close. And he's starring in a reality show about Alaska. What's it like seeing your dad on TV now?
Yeah, my dad and I had a tumultuous relationship. He grew up in an abusive household. When my mom left, he started drinking and he had PTSD and was trauma triggering, but we didn't know any of those words. And he became abusive. And when I left home, I was kind of like, that's it. I really didn't think we'd have a relationship. But he has just done the self work we have an incredible relationship. People ask me, how did you do it? And really, I think it was that I did my own healing work and he did his own healing work. And we were able to meet with a lot of forgiveness and a lot of accountability and honesty. And it's this gift. My son gets to know this incredible man. And, as a single mom down here in the States, so far from my family, it's funny, but my son gets to watch my family's show and see what we're about, like really understand what the cultures are about and how I was raised homesteading and living off the land, and that you don't kill things for nothing and that it's sacred. And It's such a great lifestyle and oddly a great thing as a mom to have that propaganda because I'm not close to my family. It's called Alaska, the Last Frontier. Yeah.
Now, your dad taught you to yodel when you were young. What is the trick to yodeling?
Just a lot of practice, probably not having many friends, nothing else to do. Um, a lot of country singers yodel, because they go, do, that kind of crack is a yodel. And then you just have to learn a tongue twister and get really neurotically hyper focused on that tongue twister.
Do you still do it?
Yes. Would you like me to yodel? Seems like where this is headed.
You know I'm building up to that, Jewel. Would you mind?
Yeah. I was taught sort of a more German style of yodeling by my dad. Swiss is much more melodic, but so going slow, it goes yodel, 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 and then when you go fast, it goes.
Oh, that is fantastic.
I can't tell you how many times in my career I was playing for the Ramones, solo acoustic opening, or for Everclear, or for Peter Murphy and Bauhaus. And if I yodeled, it finally got everybody's attention. Like that yodeling saved me many times.
Jewel, it is such a treat to meet you. I can't believe it's 25 years since Pieces of You came out. Thank you so much for your time. You are an extraordinary woman and you have so much to teach so many. So thank you for sharing all of your beautiful music and all of your beautiful lessons.
Well, thank you. Australia for me was such an important thing and time in my life because my record was such a failure in so many places. But Australia, God bless, just adopted me and cared about songwriting. And I couldn't get other places to even let me in the building. I remember France was like, don't even come to the record label. We don't want to meet you. So thank heavens for Australia and just the lifelong support.
Well, we know talent and beautiful music when we see it. Come on down. We'd love to see you again.
I would love it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jewel.